Okay, the other thing that I want to make sure we touch on early on here that I would like for you to talk a little bit about in your paper is ethics. Okay, this was talked about early on in your book about ethical standards and how ethics play a role in an institution providing services and in policies and the guidelines that are created around that. We have to have ethical standards. So this is where the code of ethics from the NASW comes into play. So this is not a code that you need to memorize, but you do need to be familiar with it. So I just want to say a little bit more about ethics, particularly as we're thinking through how it connects back to policy and social welfare policy in particular. So as a one-on-one thing around ethics, when we think about ethical boundaries, oftentimes we go to the extremes. So for example, we think about having an inappropriate sexual relationship with a client. Of course, that's a dumb moment, right? We would never do that. Most of us are like, oh, we know that's inappropriate. We get that. We know that's crossing boundaries. But what about something like driving a client to an appointment or helping a client move on a Saturday when you're not working? Those can also be boundary violations and then ethical violations. If your company does not allow for you to drive clients because of liability issues, because it's not part of the level of case management that your agency provides, because it's just not something that they have enough insurance for. If your company says no, you're not allowed to drive clients, then you're not allowed to drive clients. And so if you say, well, but they need a ride and they don't have anybody else and I'm the only one, and you do it anyway, that's a boundary violation and therefore an ethical one. You've crossed over a line with that client. Now let's say you move on to a different job. Next case manager steps in and that client says, but so-and-so used to always drive me. So-and-so used to always do this for me. Now you've made it more difficult for the new case manager to set those appropriate boundaries, along with violating them yourself. Another example is that I talked about was helping a client move. I once knew a case manager who did that. She decided that this client needed help, and so she took her own time on a Saturday and took her truck and helped this client move from point A to point B. And some of us might think, oh, well, that's great. That's really awesome that she did that. Except it's not awesome because it was a clear violation of boundaries. Her role was not as friend who could come and help you move. Her role was as this person's case manager. And so it muddied the waters significantly for this case manager and for that client in particular. Also, we can think about it in terms of how much hand-holding do we do. So, there's an old saying that a social worker should never work harder than his or her client. So, we should never be doing more than what our client's doing. If our client is kicking and screaming, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it, and we're trying to drag them through the door to get them to do it, we're working harder than they are. Clients have a right to make poor decisions. Oftentimes, one of the things that we have to do as social workers, which can be very, very difficult, is advocate for people to be able to make their own really bad decisions. So, an example of that is my husband, who's also a social worker, was working in an arena that had an interdisciplinary team. So, most of them medical, so therapists, like physical and occupational therapists, a nurse, case manager. I think there were a couple other, like maybe a CNA or a medical assistant of some kind. And they all worked together. He was the only social worker in the room. And they wanted him to force a person to come into this center that they had and come in more often because they deemed that it would be good for her to do so. And my husband had to say, sorry, that's not how this works. He had to say, this client has the right to not come in. if she doesn't want to. She meets the requirement for the program, and she does what she has to stay in the program. She doesn't want to do anything more than that. And they're like, yeah, well, you need to get her to come in here, and you need to coax her with chocolate, or whatever their ideas were. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, the team got very upset with him about that because he wasn't doing what was best for her. And he said, it's not my decision. It's not up to me to decide what's best for her. She decides what's best for her. And she's decided she doesn't want to come in anymore. Now, do I think she would benefit from coming in more? Of course I do. I think it would be great for her to do that. But she doesn't want to. So we can't force her to do that. She is an autonomous person and makes her own decisions about what she does and doesn't want to do. So when you're thinking about your paper, I want you to think about the ethical pieces of whatever policy you're looking at. Weave that into what you're doing in your analyses. All of the analyses have specific parts. We're going to get into those. But ethics is an important piece to remember, and it should be interwoven in the paper. Okay? Thanks.